whenever we talk about the business of screenwriting, it seems like everybody always wants to know, how do I sell my script? How do I become a professional writer? So I'd like to start there and kind of get all of your takes on what makes a cinematically viable script or a pilot in Rob's case.
Jon, you want to start?
Well, sure. I work for an independent finance company, so what we look for might be different than, say, what you're looking for in TV or at the studio level, and concentrating more strictly on sort of the business side of it. I think the important thing is to take into consideration things like your target demographic, how much it's going to cost to actually make it. These are a lot of questions that we have to ask ourselves. A lot of times we start first with the creative. How good is it? How much do we really like this? Is it a story worth telling? But then we have to shift it and say, can we actually afford to make this? And that's a problem that we come into a lot of times. It's this beautiful character drama and it's great, but really there's only one demographic, say the older demographic, so you can't set it in Paris and you can't have that music that you really want. We can't have that big action sequence that you want. We also take a look at things like casting and what's the director we're going to get for it. How are we going to put it together? The indie marketplace is kind of exploding right now. As one of the agencies was just saying to us the other day, there's never been more money in Hollywood than there is today. So there's a lot of people vying to try and make projects. The trick is, how do you actually afford it at the price that you need? So we're looking at what sells internationally, what are the movies that are making money. I think comps are probably a really good idea. Write your movie, take a look at other films in that space, and take a look at what their box office was, how much they were made for. Take that stuff into consideration when you're actually writing your screenplay, because that's the first thing that'll kill a project for us after we've decided that we like it.
Can you, quickly before we move on, could you just talk about what is selling internationally though? What do the, because that's such a big deal, a big part of it too.
It's a moving target. Bold Films is a co-owner of Sierra Affinity, which is one of the biggest sales companies out there, and we have this conversation with them pretty much weekly. What are people looking for? It's probably easier to say what doesn't work internationally. Comedies don't work internationally. For a fun exercise, go into Box Office Mojo, pick out the best, biggest comedies you can possibly think of, and look at what they make domestically and then internationally. Will Ferrell in particular is really fascinating. His movies will make $250 million in the US and $18 million everywhere else in the world. And the reason is that it's sense of humor. What Germany finds funny, France doesn't. What France finds funny, London doesn't. So we can't really touch comedy. Action, though, sells universally. Everybody loves a good action movie, which is where we look at action comedies, and then we can sell the action part of it. Dramas are really tough as well because the market is really small. How many people really want to, you can't really point to any box office blockbusters on these really, really small dramas. Elevated genre. It's what we always look for. It's what we keep being told we want. And really that's just a fancy way of just saying we want the whole package, which is elevated three-dimensional characters against a commercial backdrop that we can sell. The best example I can think of for structure is, although not scope, but is Titanic. I mean, you look at Titanic and that is a beautiful, indie, small, period, love story, archetypal, Romeo and Juliet, everybody gets it. You could take that story, lift it off the boat, put it in the middle of London, and that movie still works. It's still beautiful. People go and see it. But you put that beautiful love story on a sinking boat, and now it's a billion-dollar franchise. So we look for things that are sort of similar. Take that great, beautiful relationship character story, put it against a commercial backdrop. As I like to joke, I tell writers, I said, what we're looking for is pitch me that beautiful, small, indie movie, and then end your pitch with in space, and we're probably off to the races.
And in television, it's interesting. We have a voracious appetite for drama right now. Mm-hmm. The market is going so wide, and the dramatic series business is exploding. So we're looking for, both in evaluating writers and trying to sell stuff to the marketplace, we're always looking for a strong point of view. We're looking for a voice within the writing, and then we're looking for a marketing platform, something that we can give a lot of these burgeoning digital platforms as well as the established networks to build upon so they can bring an audience into a character story, essentially.
I think there's really two ways that material reaches the studios. I'm going to talk about it from the studio standpoint. And it comes to the studio with attachments, with directors or actors or a screenwriter attached. And that's what makes the material even more appealing, is that it's already some of the work is already done. We already know who has a vision for it, who they see in the cast, what kind of budget they have. So they're coming to the studio really for financing and some creative collaboration. But that's not necessarily helpful to new screenwriters because it has to go through a lot of steps before it gets to the studio side with material, with attachments. The other thing, though, and this can give you all hope, is when a piece of material is really excellent, it's moving, or it's unique, or it's a unique voice, or it's a unique setting. It can get passed around as a sample, or it can get submitted as you have to read this. It's just so different. It's just so unique. The writer's nobody, the writer doesn't have an agent, the writer came from wherever. And people will read that. And if your material is excellent, there is a way in that way too. So it may not mean your script's gonna get bought or get made, but it can get you some attention. So really it comes down to having a really good script at the end of the day.
It's a really good point. I love this story. I'm friends with a screenwriter named Gary Spinelli who is writing these sort of lower B action movies of sorts. They were good, but they were definitely smaller, and he was having a hard time getting them made. And he realized it was because it was all about the casting, and he had these aspirations of wanting to work on these big, great, beautiful movies. So as he tells me, just one day he went, I just always wanted Johnny Depp in a movie, so I just decided to write a story for Johnny Depp. What that forced him to do was only concentrate on the character and write the best character he possibly could, and then he found sort of a story, a commercial backdrop that he thought would actually get some attention, and that was just his goal. And it was this project called Mina that he eventually pitched at Imagine Entertainment, which got Ron Howard attached to it, that he sold to Universal for $1 million. And now Doug Liman is directing it with Tom Cruise. So he didn't get Johnny, but he got Tom. But it all started with him just going, I just want to write for this guy. And it forced him to write a quality piece of material.
The key word in that is quality, because that script is excellent.
That's
and
fantastic.
Everyone read it because it's good, not because necessarily because they heard talent was interested at the
100%.
time. But channeling your focus into taking in these elements of how to make it marketable and interesting to talent, to a director is key. But at the end of the day, it was really great writing.
Yeah.
How do you make it stand out though, especially in the environment now that is so focused on brand and intellectual property? Like, how does the writer approach the spec market then? Like you were saying, I'll try to identify a character, but what about even in terms of concept? Like, what sort of backdrop? I mean, you said in space, but that also, when you say in space, that all of a sudden that adds $100 million to the budget.
Not necessarily. Look at Moon. Moon is brilliant. You have one establishing shot of a moon base, shoot the rest of the movie in an apartment, and suddenly it feels bigger. But that's why, we look at movies like District 9, Looper, Source Code, all sci-fi movies that are contained and small. This is why I always say in space, because in space really just means you're in a contained environment. They're actually really cheap to shoot, unless of course you're breaking out gravity and you get outside the spaceship. So just stay in the spaceship. It's a lot easier, it's a lot cheaper. But I think it's going back to both the quality. It can't be oversold. Three-dimensional characters, somebody that just pops off the page. It sounds really esoteric, and I wish I could tell you sort of the key to making that happen. But if you have a great character, and I want to keep seeing what happens to that character, we're off to the races. It's the kind of script, not unlike, say, a Mina or something where, as Erin was saying, you're passing it around town because you just have to read it. It's amazing. So three-dimensional, good motivations behind what these characters are going for. I would say an emotional connection with them, a sympathy for what they're going for. It's answering the basic question of why do I care? What happens to these people? And then it's a unique concept, just something we haven't seen before, and that's as simple as just an idea. This is why I love ideas from everywhere, from our senior execs all the way down to our interns, because I don't know if my interns were sitting around getting drunk on a Saturday night and you got that one guy who went, wouldn't it be cool if? And boom, there's a great idea that comes out of it. There's a famous story of how Alien got sold, where they walked into Fox and just went, Jaws in space. And they went, great, we'll buy it. That's all you need.
What about for TV though, for when you're looking at TV pilots? Because in that environment where police procedures, all this stuff's been done over and over
it's a little
again,
bit
how do you
different
stand
environment
out?
for sure. I think the idea is certainly less important than the execution. We have to churn out sausage. We've got a very short time frame to get a lot of work done. So a lot of people say there's not a lot of original ideas in television. I'm more in that camp than the other. But seeing someone execute a show that either invites you into a character's world or, conversely, not in a serialized world, a show that can be produced and repeated in a way that's meaningful for the audience, I think that's really the key.
And this is not a screenwriting class, but the idea, though, it starts with character. And you hear the term world building a lot these days with development, and that is interesting to people, like what different version of space, what different version of a dystopian future, et cetera. And that's you know, where you can provide something unique, but it all comes down to character. Every story is about a guy who or a girl who. And that can't, and that's, I think that's true for TV and features. And sometimes because we talk about the marketplace and we talk about how to engineer something that will have international appeal or box office appeal, you can't lose the fact that it still has to be a good story. And that sounds really simple, but I do think it bears repeating.
How about things to stay away from? Because I'm sure everyone's read a bad TV script or a bad screenplay. So what are the common mistakes you see even professional writers making over and over again that you immediately turns you off and like, I'm not reading another page of this?
It's a good question. I mean, you know, kind of going away from what I just said, you know, what we do is mostly derivative in television to a certain extent. But I wouldn't start with that as an orienting principle as a writer. You know, I would find something that you connect to and then try to bring your own voice and story into it. Because we go in so many times in pitch projects where people say, that's a great idea, that's a great character, but inevitably the question comes, why you? Why are you going to tell the story? And that's where you have to bring something personal to it. That's where I think the best product is made. I think that's where the deepest stories are. And I think that's where the writer can really control more of the narrative. So, you know, I would say try to find something that's meaningful to you.
I think that's true. I think it comes down to, it's so easy to be derivative. There's so much entertainment. We've all seen so many movies and so many TV shows, and being unique among that is really unique and quality. To be different, but to also be really good. And that's, I mean, be different and good. That's terrible advice, but like that is essentially,
Great advice.
It's essentially the best advice because when I see specs that hit the marketplace, you know, an agency will drum up a lot of attention. It's like this Friday, it's going out to every studio. Who's going to buy it? And then there's all this like, oh, we can't wait to see it. And then it's just kind of like something we've seen before, or it feels like a retread, and just enough of a way that it's not worth it. It's so hard to get a movie made. It's so much money, and the machine is so big that it really has to be motivating to people and exciting to people to work on it. So I've heard pitches before where writers talk about, well, it's going to be, you know, this world or this setting or this time period, and then it'll have, you know, those characters we're familiar with, like a guy, a hero who's down on his luck, or you can't reduce it all to cliche. Really try and do something that is fresh and is completely unique to you as a writer.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. You know, no one person really greenlights a movie. So even when we find a project, we have to sell it to somebody else, even if it's our own company. So it's going to take a certain amount of passion for us to have to turn around and go, guys, you have to read this. And the begged question is why? And then we have to answer that. I used to work for original film for Neil Moritz, who now I think has the largest producing quote in the world. He's the guy behind Fast and the Furious and that whole franchise. And his thing was always, when I came to him with a script, I had to pitch it to him in one line or less. That was all I got to tell him why he should spend his time on this. And as he explained it, because he comes from marketing, he said, that's the only amount of information I can fit on a one sheet and in a trailer. And if you can't capture my attention in one line, I won't be able to capture the audience's attention. So I need to go in there and go, you just gotta read this, and I need a trailer that is going to get the audience to go, oh my God, I have to watch this. It's not enough to just say, oh, the critics liked it, or hey, it's, you know, the reviews are really good. You've gotta capture somebody's attention with that passion. In terms of mistakes, I don't know if I want to say mistakes per se, but things that make it more difficult for people who are kind of starting out, at least in my experience. First is, let's say you've got that great character, not going any farther and having a concept behind it. I mean, these are scripts where I go, man, these characters are popping off the page. but I don't know what they're doing. I always call it characters in search of a story, where you just go, it's not that it's not entertaining, but that's where I go, I can't sell this on a trailer because they're not doing anything. They're just hanging out in a coffee shop, or they're just talking. And quite frankly, that works really well for TV in the sense where that's why you tune into TV, is to just see characters time and time again just sort of be. But in the feature, I need a 3-act structure for it. And a lot of it I see is people write very small. You know, they're starting out and they say, well, I don't really know if I'm going to get 20 million, 50 million, 100 million for my movie, so I'm going to write for what maybe is more attractive, you know, a $500,000 budget, $1 million budget, and you get these incredibly tiny stories, and the problem is they also don't seem to have breakout potential. That's what we always look at when we look at smaller movies. Like we did Whiplash. We didn't want to go to Sundance, but we took one look at it, and our financier, when he saw the short film, just said, this isn't a music movie. This has nothing to do with jazz. Anybody who has ever sacrificed to be great will relate to this movie. Anybody who has ever been pushed to be better will relate to this movie. This could be a sports movie. This could be about anything. It's relatable. It has breakout potential. I will finance this. I think this has a shot at making it. And he just took an all-in bet on it because it had that breakout potential. But now I get a lot of scripts, and they go, well, you did really well off of this Sundance movie. I got this Sundance movie about 2 people in a coffee shop talking about the death of their mother. And I go, I don't know what the audience for that. That's not something that's universally relatable. So swing for the fences. I mean, write for a bigger budget. You know, we're looking in the 20s and 30s now. Studios won't touch something below 60. Write something great that has something to say, that can reach that wider audience.
So let's move on then to sort of the next. Let's say somebody has written something that's cinematically viable. So what's the next step for a writer? How do we go about getting representation? How do you get that material in the hands of people that can actually do something with it? Because there is that catch-22 of, you know, no one's going to read your script unless you have an agent or manager, and agent or manager typically doesn't want your script unless you have a studio or production company that's interested in it. So how do you get past that?
Yeah, again, I'd say it's a little bit different TV versus film, but not completely. You have to be tenacious. You have to be a networker. I know that's antithetical to sometimes someone who wants to sit behind a computer and tell stories, but the truth of the matter, it's like anything else in life. You have to be aggressive and voracious in terms of asking people to introduce you, to get your scripts to people, ask them to read it. Be open when they give you feedback. That's a very important thing, because I think when representatives give no's, people think that's the end of the conversation. It really should be the start of the conversation if you manage that properly. It's easier to get a manager these days than it is an agent. I've seen the management business, especially in the writer space, grow dramatically over the last decade. You know, for a while it was kind of considered, you know, just an actor's kind of luxury, but nowadays the agents are really focused on building businesses, mergers and acquisitions. You see a lot less client focus within the larger agencies especially. So getting a manager who then gives you a leg up to get into an agency is always a good first step, I think.
Mm-hmm. I mean, networking really is, I know it's such a hard thing to maybe create a strategy for, but that is so much of what it is. It is going to be just the right people knowing you and giving you a chance, but the material is also, you know, having the good material is what's going to be your best calling card, so start with that. But I do think it's true. I mean, writers, it's antithetical to their personality to get out there and sell themselves, but that's what you are. You have to think of yourself as a single industry. Like your small business is you. And the same way you would nurture a small business and invest in that is the same way you have to invest in yourself. And so that means stepping outside your comfort zone and approaching people, sending emails, networking, being gracious about it, being patient. You will get a lot of no's before you get a yes. But you know, that's the business, and it's really hard. And if it wasn't really hard, then we would all be doing it like with great success. So
I think you make a great point as seeing yourself as a business and somehow separate from your ego and separate from your material. What I see a lot of screenwriters do is, you're talking about quality a lot, which is critical, but it's hard to evaluate quality certainly in a vacuum. What a lot of writers do is they go to their friends and family for, you know, feedback on their writing. That's not really a great place to get feedback. You know, I had a showrunner that I worked with recently, and we were having a debate on a certain scene, and he said, "Well, I went to this cast member and this person, and they all think it's great." And I said, "Well, all those people work for you, you know." So, yeah, so. So ask people outside of your sphere of influence. Ask people who you respect that aren't your friends. You really need good feedback to help make that piece of material as good as it can be.
And the one thing I'd add is that screenplay, like competitions like Nicholl's, is fantastic if you can get some traction there. I know a lot of representatives who search for clients from people who are kind of running up the ranks of those. Nicholl's in particular. My old assistant is now a writer because one day she said, I want to be a writer. She wrote a script. I gave her some notes on it. She went around the entire company, got some notes. She submitted it to Nicholl's. She became a quarterfinalist. Then she got a manager off of that. That manager got the script on the blacklist. And now, boom, she's off to the races, and she's just a full-fledged writer because she wrote one script. And Rob makes the best point in the world is take that feedback. That no should be the start of a conversation. That is the greatest thing you can probably hear when you're starting out, because the opposite end of it is that you're just automatically a brilliantly perfect writer who will never need notes, and there's never a writer in the world that doesn't get notes, take notes. So consider it always growing. So when you get that no, think of it as an educational experience. Find out why. Ask that one extra question if you can. If you have the opportunity, and understand those people know what they're doing. That's why they're working in this business. So when they say, nah, because the third act doesn't work, or no, I just wasn't emotionally interested, there is no version where they're wrong and you're right. You don't get to walk away and go, well, I just believe in it. They're there for a reason, and they're giving the objective view. So what you think might be coming across probably isn't. The best writers I've ever worked with are the ones where I say, oh, here's a note, and they go, I kind of disagree, and here's why. And I go, okay, great, we'll just move on. It's not the big enough. They go, no. There was something you bumped on. There was something in that. Maybe it's this. Maybe this is the thing. And through that conversation, you kind of go, yeah, that's it. I think you put your finger on it, and boom, now we've got a better script as a result of it. Take that critical, constructive criticism anywhere you can get, and as objectively as you can.
I mean, I'm sure you've all heard that writing is rewriting, and it's kind of the same with your attitude is as much going to represent you as your material. You can be a great writer, but if you stink as a person, they'll buy your script and send you away, and you'll never work again. So you have to remember that it's both. And part of that good attitude is being agreeable in terms of listening to people's feedback. You can filter through it later, but being a good collaborator is a key part of working.
The other thing I want to try to get into before we take some Q&A is the importance of pitching for a writer and being able to do that. And I think that if you do all of a sudden have some heat behind you, you win or place well in Nicholl's, all of a sudden someone's advocating for you, eventually there may be a meet and greet meeting. I thought we could start with Rob talking about how do you coach your clients to have that initial meeting, or what sort of advice do you give to them, and then also then...
Yeah, there's a lot of classes, a lot of people who are experts on pitching. I coach my clients a lot on kind of, let's say, the confidence angle, because ultimately I believe that effective pitching is an exchange of energy in that room, and regardless of the idea, whether it's good, medium, great, whatever it is, you've got to make people want to be in business with you. You've got to be the expert in the room. You have to be the one that's going to take them on that journey. Sean Levy's a guy in our business that a lot of people know. He's a big feature director. I've never seen anybody better in a room, ever. There was a guy up here a couple panels ago named Trey Calloway, who I represented for many years. Excellent in a room. He owns the room. I think pitching is, you got to fake it. Even if you don't feel confident, even if you're wildly nervous, you have to rehearse in a way that doesn't feel rehearsed when you go in the room, but rehearse how to project that confidence. That's what I think the most important part of it is.
I'm just going to jump in because it's a really good point that you have to fake it. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got when I was starting out was nobody knows what they're doing in this town. So the more confident you are, I mean, look, it's an art game essentially that we're into. There is no guaranteed hit. There is no guarantee that this is the right way to go. It's all subjective. I was an intern when I was 19, and my first boss handed me a stack of 10 scripts, and he said, read all of these. If you like any of them, I haven't, I'm going to throw them out, and if you like any of them, I'll let you develop them with the writer, and that'll be your payment for getting me coffee. And I said, I have no idea what I'm doing. He said, great, first rule of producing, they don't know that. Just stay on the phone. Don't let them know that you look like you're a 12-year-old little child, and just have the confidence behind what you're doing. And quite frankly, it worked. I picked out one of the scripts. I worked with the writer all summer long. And it was Agent Cody Banks that I gave to my boss, who sold it to MGM right at the end of it, and we were boom off to the races. He didn't even meet me until we sold the project. But all it was me picking up the phone, going, no, this will be cool. Not, hey, maybe, kind of, don't you think, sort of, would you like to do this? It's, no, here's what we should do, here's what we should do, here's what we should do. People respond to that at every level, and in the room, it's all about that. Because I'm sitting on the other side, going, I don't know, man, do I greenlight this? Do I not? Do I want to put the money into it? Do I not? And then you get somebody like Trey, who I met last night, and you can tell that guy is amazing in the room. He is going to tell me that it was going to be good. He's going to make me feel better about my choice, because I go, well, I'll just back his play. That's great. He's obviously very confident. It helps.
There's an element of, and this is going to sound scary, but of interrogation of a pitch. And I don't mean like the light bulb and you sweating underneath it, but it is the job of the people listening to the pitch to look for problems, look for holes, look for places where you seem unsure. And as soon as that's spotted, then it's like, okay, this could be an issue. So, I mean, I think one of the things I tell people in our pitch class in the LA Quarter, the first step of it is to become conversational about your material. Like, just don't burst into a sweat and turn bright red the minute someone's like, so what are you working on? Being able to have a few sentences, being able to have a 5-minute, 10-minute, just to start. Just talking about your material teaches you how to talk about it and talk about yourself, makes you examine it for problems or holes or anything before you get into a room with people who are going to incise it, who listen to pitches all day and are going to know exactly where to look for problems.
Clear and concise, by the way, would also be great, to the point. I've been in pitches that lasted an hour and a half. Oh, yeah. And I go, I can't concentrate, just get to the point of it. So,
when you say that, because I mean, like, I think some people, when they first starting off pitching, they feel like they have to tell the whole story, and it starts the end then. Like,
what I usually like is almost like a layering system. Like, here's the log line, and by the way, the conversational aspect is fantastic. It opens up the room. It gets you. It's very easy to speak. Like, log line, this is the overview. And then here's sort of a short version of what we're kind of looking at. And then you can kind of launch into the pitch, but I like pitches at like 20 minutes. Say, all in. That's about the amount of time that I can both pay attention, and that's all it should take. If it's taking longer than that, you don't know what you have. That was my problem with Neil. That's where it came from with the one line. I would go in and go, okay. Well, you start here on like the opening scene, but this is kind of important for later. He's like, you don't have a story. And he's writing emails, and he's on the phone, and I've lost his attention. You just got to grab them from the get-go. Again, jaws in space. Like, boom, I get that. We're off to the races. Clear, concise, to the point, so that we can make a decision based on what it is. All I'm looking for is, what's the story? How much is it going to cost? What's the demographic I'm going to sell it to? And am I interested? However you can convey that amount of information as quickly as possible is the best thing you can do.
Well, we're going to open up to some questions then. And we're using the mics, right? So if anybody has a question. Obviously, a huge line over at the before. The other thing I wanted to touch on too, because we mentioned Los Angeles, and everybody up here has spent, either you guys all live in LA currently, but how important is Los Angeles for a writer? Because we're obviously in Chicago right now. How important is that move, and is it necessary?
Well, I want to say one thing, like your stories about your assistant and Cody and your internship. It's because you were there, and part of it's not a requirement, but yes, it's going to be maybe slightly easier is the wrong word, more accessible to people who put themselves on a lot in a production office, who are there and present and in front of people. So, to tell the truth, I mean, it does matter a little bit.
A lot of it's all about networking. It really is who you know and running into those people. And it's not even the meeting, it's who your neighbor is. Who do they know? You move out there and you're living in an apartment in the Valley, probably 3 of your neighbors are also struggling writers, but they might know somebody. Then you start networking, and one of them knows a manager, and hey, I can get you in over here. And I can't stress the importance of networking and socializing and getting to know people. More often than not, that's sort of what it's taken to sort of get that break in.
So I think there's a way to do that remotely. I think that thank God the internet allows you access to everybody. It's easier to find people, and it's just going to be about creating the right sort of first communication via email or phone call.
Yeah, unlike computer science, it is a people business. I mean, I remember I moved out to LA from St. Louis, and I just joined a co-ed volleyball league on the beach, and one of the guys met there. used me as a PA on his student film at Loyola Marymount. He ended up becoming my first client when I was an agent. It's you gotta network. I mean, it's LA or New York. LA gives you a little bit more advantage, but I think proximity has big advantages.
Sure. All right, we have a question.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
One of the first things that really hit me was when you said both comedies and dramas are hard to pitch internationally. I'm a romantic comedy kind of person.
Great.
So as my first feature is a romantic comedy, what kind of ball game am I playing?
Well, romantic comedy is a bit different. I mean, the comedy, when I talk about comedy, is like slapstick comedy, just straight up comedy. Rom-com, kind of like an action comedy, you can lean on the romance of it because romance travels. Everybody likes to fall in love. You start looking at movies like The Vow, The Notebook. There's a third one there, I haven't seen it, but it's all kind of the same. They're all made for $25 million, they all made $125 million. Just boom, full stop, that's what those make. Now those are straight up romances, so on the romantic comedy, I'm sure the numbers are slightly skewed, but romance travels. You've got to find things that are just universal. That's what I'm getting at, just strictly on the international marketplace. That's all I kind of am speaking to. Dramas travel, like I said, they're just small.
Got it. So,
If the script is good, it will get made here. You will not need to worry about international box office. I mean, it's more like make sure that there's quality and aim for a movie that makes $100 million, maybe not $500 million, and that's a good goal. So don't let it hold you back.
Talk a lot about, but that at least romantic comedy is like a defined genre. It's not something that's like, so you know there's an audience for it. So in a way you can make an argument that there's a market for it as opposed to something which tries to, go like a dramedy or something where it's harder to place, like you were saying, who's the audience for this film? You know who the
A
audience
familiar genre that that we all know, like romantic comedy, when people can classify something, that does help. So it's just because it doesn't necessarily travel internationally doesn't mean it's not a worthy project.
got it. Okay, great. And so my second question is, I heard I got two. So, so when working with characters, obviously, one character you have a focus, but when you're dealing with an ensemble piece, 3 characters, what's important? Is it okay to have 3 main characters, or is it always one, and then you play with the, you have 2 more? But when it comes to ensemble, what's, how can you play to the strengths of each character, or do you really just come back to one?
I would say, and I only say this because I'm dealing with this right now on a project that was an ensemble, and for us it was pick 1, maybe 2 that stand out as leads. 1, it's so that you can create that emotional connection for the audience. That's going to be sort of your access point into that story. But 2, it's frankly for casting. And again, this matters a bit more to me than, say, the studio, who can break people a little bit easier. But I need to cast somebody who has international value, and I hand it to them, and they look at it and go, not only am I just one of a group, but if you're an ensemble, you don't have a lot of meat on the bone there. For like a character arc, what's going to get them creatively excited about it? So the trick is to find a character or 2 that you can take to a leading man or woman that'll have enough meat on the bone that they go, oh my God, I need to play this character. It's my thought.
Great.
Good afternoon. I know that y'all, as y'all speak to us here, y'all emphasis is on mainly like writing for film, but I had written an original pilot script and I had submitted it to a festival for professionals to read, and they gave me some great feedback, and they just said it was pretty mixed, but it was one thing in particular that they said that I did in the script, and they said that I was like on the nose, and I'd like to ask you guys, can y'all elaborate with me on what that is, what on the nose is, being on the nose when you're writing the script?
They used on the nose as a criticism. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that was one of them.
My sense in a vacuum is it probably felt too familiar to them, maybe. It's hard to answer exactly what they meant by that note. You have any insight?
I think traditionally it's used when they mean they're reading it and they're they can expect, what happens is expected, which is to say that by page 20, they understand what's going to happen at page 50, can guess, and are accurate. Which just means that you followed good, solid traditional formula, but maybe followed it so well that because people watch so much TV, we ingest so much entertainment, we have been trained to like guess what's going to happen in 30 pages. And so the burden is on the writer sometimes to use that same structure that we all rely on, but go somewhere a little bit unexpected, go somewhere a little bit different. I don't know if that's...
I couldn't have said it better,
Yeah.
probably.
All right, great. So it looks like we're out of time, but before we leave, any last closing advice for writers? I know this was all kind of that, but any last piece of information you want to get across before they kick us off?
Same advice I give to everyone, which is stick with it. You know, just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Don't let adversity stop you. It's the people that keep going after they hit those no's, after they hit those hurdles, that are the ones you're watching and aspiring to be.
It's cumulative. The more you write, the better you get. If you write more years, you'll be better. And success will taste just as sweet in 5 years or 10 as it does now.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing. Just keep writing. I asked a writer once, I said, how do you write? Like, how do you come up with like a 90-page script? And he said, I just write 1 page a day. In 90 days, I'll have a script. It's all. But he forces himself, good or bad, write 1 page a day, so that you just get in the practice of constantly working, because there's so many great reasons to just not write that day, that week, that month. The timing's not right. You have a headache. Man, I'll come up with a great idea at dinner tonight, not breakfast. Just write the damn page. Just write it, get it out there, and get in the practice of pushing that keyboard. You know, everybody always asks me how I pick out a good script, how I know a good script, and I said it's really easy. Just read 1,000 scripts. Read 1,000 scripts. There's only probably going to be one in there that really pops out. It's kind of the same thing with writing. You just have to keep doing it. Just keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, and eventually it'll just get better and better and better and better.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, guys, for coming today.
Thank you.